This is the UFC Norfolk post-fight show here on MMAfighting.com. My name is Luke Thomas. Thank you so much for watching. I'm the host of the Monday Morning Analyst, as well as the Promotional Malpractice live chat on MMA Fighting. This is the post-fight show. I don't know how often we're going to do these here. I don't know when, or I cannot give you any kind of regularity schedule, but here we are right now to talk about everything we just saw. Now, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you don't necessarily care too much about spoilers, but if you do, this is your chance to get off and not watch this and catch the show at a later time at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if you want spoilers, if you don't mind spoilers, if you want to talk about UFC Norfolk, let's do that now. Okay. What a great card. What a great card that was. I am delighted to be here. A lot to get to. Let's start. In fact, I'm going to pull up the results here. Sorry I didn't do that before the show. A lot to get to. This took place at the, let's see, the Ted Constant Convocation Center in Norfolk, Virginia, or as they say in Norfolk, something I don't particularly care for. But if you're just joining us now, moments ago, Dustin Poirier defeated Anthony Pettis via TKO submission, but due to injury at 2:08 of the third round. What do you want to say about this contest? A lot. Let's take a step back. Number one, I love this fight. I absolutely love this fight. I loved everything about this fight. Prior to it happening, I love the matchmaking. I love the contrast of styles. You have two guys who are a bit Jekyll and Hyde-ish, guys who, when they perform up to their best, are the very best in the division, but can show you at times, at their worst, to have extraordinary liabilities that you would think would not be there given the heights they can reach, but sometimes they show up. But in this fight, I don't think you really saw that. In fact, I think in either case, you saw two guys who were really capable of showing you and did show you their very best. Ultimately, the physical body of Anthony Pettis giving out. But it was an exciting fight on paper, and it absolutely delivered in a main event. In a perfect world, it would have gone a little bit longer, I suppose, but nevertheless, an exciting, dramatic contest. Okay, so here's what I loved about it. Going into the contest, what would you have said were the keys to victory? You probably would have said range, I think. My hunch was if Dustin Poirier was going to win, he was going to win where he does well. Probably if we're talking about striking, in that boxing range. And you always knew he was really great on the ground. Anthony Pettis has surprising jiu-jitsu, but I think mostly has like this sort of guard savvy, or can catch you when you're not really anticipating it, but doesn't necessarily have in the full breadth of the game of jiu-jitsu the kind of game that Dustin Poirier does. And I think that played out. You saw Dustin Poirier, striking a little bit at range, but really getting on Anthony Pettis in rounds 1, in rounds 2, in rounds 3, right on top of him, pressing into him, getting him against the fence, and then getting excellent takedowns. And then from there, not allowing him to really recover position. And when he did, being able to, from the tight waist, suck him back down, drag him back down, lock up a body. I really mean to say, this is a guy who did not merely in a more general sense compete up to the level which you expect him, but more specifically would make decisions that didn't serve his strengths. And I don't think you really have to worry about that this time. He actually did make decisions that served his strengths. Now, in the last 30 seconds of round 1, you saw him striking it out in boxing range, but in the kind of way where it was like rock'em sock'em a little bit with Anthony Pettis. But okay, it wasn't like he was doing this in sort of some prolonged exposure. It was fairly contained. And so I really appreciated that from him. I like when a fighter who is very good sticks to their strengths. I know we want to praise guys who like bite down on the mouthpiece and go after it. But I think to me, the big lesson here was like, look how good Dustin Poirier is when he doesn't make decisions that work against his own interests. He's really good. He's really good. And that's what you saw tonight. Masterful job with takedowns, masterful job with cage pressure, masterful job with top pressure, masterful job with back takes, controlling. Now you're going to say Anthony Pettis was able to reverse inside position, getting his shoulder blades to the mat, finding high hips, and getting a way to win. Sure, okay, absolutely. Something to be said for that. But I just feel like for all the times we've left the Dustin Poirier fight where either he won or he lost, and you're like, yeah, he just did X, and I don't know why he did X because it doesn't really serve his interests. Here he finally made decisions that did. and that really deserves to be acknowledged. Now, that takes us to Anthony Pettis, who, man, he had a tough go of it. He had his moments when he was at range. He looked pretty good, but he kept getting backed up against the two black lines and then ultimately the fence. From there, he had some okay takedown defense, and he had a really active guard, constantly hunting triangles, constantly hunting arm bars, constantly really just trying to find things to make it work from the bottom position, which I really respect. And that triangle he had was so tight, and that was at the second round. But Poirier managed to flip, and when you can turn someone and you can – part of what makes a triangle tight is that if you can lock it up, you can do a crunch, right? You bring everything down together. You bring your knees and your hips and your abs together, right? Everything is contained and controlled. If you can separate that, the triangle becomes looser, right? So part of a triangle is, yes, the legs are locked up, but sometimes you can be super separated and still finish it. It all depends on the position and the person or whatever. But just to be clear, a lot of it is you want to crunch everything in, right? And Dustin Poirier was able to create some separation and then scoot his head out on top. And so, just credit to a guy who, a veteran experience and has excellent defensive jiu-jitsu as well. But, great guard that we knew that Anthony Pettis had, but it wasn't quite enough. And he took a ton of abuse from Dustin Poirier, throwing vicious elbows, cutting him 2 times with the bridge of the nose. It appeared over the eye at one point. And the cut man had some work to do. And in fact, the doctor was called in at either the second or the third round. And they looked at him and they had to get the towel just to get the blood off, just to see where the cuts were coming from and how bad they were, but ultimately letting it go, which I also really appreciated. That was really, really quite fun to see. But an amazing and important win for Dustin Poirier. And on top of that, in addition to playing to his strengths and doing the right things, what I also really appreciated from him was when the fight was over, John Anik asked him, who do you want next? He goes, I'm not going to call anybody. I'm not going to ask for a fight. I'm going to tell you who I want, or I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to get the winner of Gaethje versus Alvarez, and I'm going to fight for a title. I just love that. I love that from Dustin Poirier. It's like, here's a guy who is so smart, who is so talented, who can do everything, who can play the levels, who trains hard, who does everything the right way, and sometimes has been his own worst enemy. And this time he was not. From game plan to execution to ultimately what happened at the end. And then, he got a bit fortuitous there, but I just mean calling out or, calling his shot anyway in the post-fight interview. It was all great. Anthony Pettis did such an amazing job in the course of this fight, getting his shoulder blades to the mat. That's key. That's key with back control. If someone has back control, you want to get, if you're lined up perfectly with them, you want to get off the alignment, right? If they're this way, you want to get off the alignment so you can turn into them. And what has to happen is the first bit of that is your shoulder blades have to touch the mat. Now, you risk giving up mount when that happens, which you saw, not in the first 2 times that Anthony Pettis did that, but I think the third or the fourth, the last one anyway. You could see Dustin Poirier was kind of preventing him, and you could see Poirier or Pettis turning, and he couldn't quite get it. Poirier lets it go for just a second, and Pettis tries to turn, but you knew, you're only in jiu-jitsu, sometimes someone's going to get a position. So you just let them get it, but you slow the rotation. You slow them get in there so you can move your body in the position that you need to counteract the chest move. And he let him do it and then took mount. But the force with which Pettis tried to get back on top again, it looked like he had separated a rib. He looked to be in extraordinary pain. He tapped immediately as Poirier took mount. So his body just gave out on him. So a Herculean effort by Anthony Pettis, who had his moments as well. Don't get me wrong. He had great ground and pound too. Both guys had savage ground and pound. An amazing performance from them. But in the end, it was just Dustin Poirier who executed whose vision, right? Dustin Poirier executed his vision, I think, just more effectively, more expertly, and more exhaustively. And in the end, that's why he's the winner. I don't know if he's going to get Justin Gaethje or Eddie Alvarez. I don't know if he's going to fight for a title, but I know he did everything he possibly could. And now I also know James Vick wanted the winner of this fight, but these guys are looking forward, not looking back, and it's a tough predicament for James Vick. But I can understand, why he would want that. So, man, what a win for those guys, huh? Or what a fight by those guys, and what a win by Dustin Poirier. Amazing job. Matt Brown defeating Diego Sanchez, KO elbow at 3:44 the first. Man, this was bad. First of all, FS1, I don't know what happened today. They, on the one hand, they did things really well, like because the cage was mic'd really well. You could hear everything, which I really appreciated. But on the other hand, they just had technical glitches left and right, including right as you see Brown, and this wasn't the first time he had done it, but he eventually grabs the ankle on like a kick off of Sanchez, shoves him back, measures with one hand. Now, you don't see this because you saw it after the fact, but he measures with one hand and then comes over with the elbow and absolutely crushes Diego Sanchez. Now, you missed that because FS1 cut to like a dual shot of like a press conference that it wasn't going to start for 2 more hours or so. It was just this weird thing. But in the end, let's talk about what actually happened, not what FS1 did. A horrible, horrible KO loss for Diego Sanchez. Look, Diego Sanchez is saying he's not going to retire, but you look at, I mean, let's talk about where he's been recently. You know about the Al Iaquinta loss. You know about this one too. 2 first-round vicious stoppages. Here is where he enters this fight. Beat Jim Miller at UFC 196, where lost to Ricardo Lamas. Beat Jim Miller, lost to Joe Lozon, TKO. So his last 4 fights, he's been stopped 3 times with strikes. Beats Marcin Held in Mexico. Loses to Al Iaquinta, jumps up a weight class, and loses to Matt Brown. Matt Brown absolutely folding him like a lawn chair. It was hard to watch, man. Diego Sanchez is a very likable guy and a very, very dedicated fighter. He got crushed here. His own face hit his own knee as his body just kind of imploded in the end there. Difficult to watch. So Matt Brown, who I spoke to earlier this week, and I believe he spoke to our own Chuck Mindenhall as well for an article that was out today, had indicated that he was having some second thoughts about retirement, not saying yes, not saying no, definitely going to take Thanksgiving and Christmas to think about things and then see where it goes. This would be a hell of a way to win. You know, he had some moments early. In fact, Diego rocked him with a body shot. You know, Matt Brown has shown some susceptibility to body shots and then manifested itself here again. But he was able to persevere, and then he literally just measured him. He just measured him, caught the ankle, drove it high, didn't let it go, pushed him back, put one hand out, I believe it was the left, and then came over with the right and absolutely just crushed him. If you're Diego Sanchez, you have to really sort of say to yourself, like, what is really left for me to do and in what capacity and what is it going to take for me to get that done? Matt Brown at least has a sober awareness of the limits of what is really possible for him, I think, and is just trying to evaluate if he can get there and what it would take and whether that's of interest to him and what's next for him. Diego Sanchez, look, man, I said it before, I'll say it again. He has the kind of mental toughness that you so deeply admire in a fighter. You know, him and Michael Bisping have like this incredible ability to persevere through challenge. But at the same time, you just sort of look around and you say, that's going to be a liability at the end of the road because they're going to have a hard time reconciling the reality that this is nothing they should be doing anymore. And so here we are. You know, if you tell yourself, I can persevere, I can do this, I'm not done, I am capable, I am ready, I am certainly in a position to win. And then you get to the end of the road like this and you're losing and you're losing and you're losing. You're used to telling yourself to not give up when things get tough. But now you're in a position where you need to be hearing that instinct. You're used to suppressing that instinct. And that can be dangerous. So I don't know what UFC is going to do. I don't know what's next for him, but those wins reminded me of like Chuck Liddell getting folded by Rich Franklin, where the body just completely shuts off. You know, it's not the worst losing streak. It's not like he's lost 5 in a row or something like Arlovski did, but nevertheless, it's pretty bad. So a great win for Matt Brown, a terrible loss for Diego Sanchez, and I guess we'll have to see what happens next with both guys. That takes us then to Andrei Arlovski versus Jr Albin, who wins 29-28 and then 2 30-27s. Really not a great fight. Probably the worst fight on this card. In the end, Arlovski wins deservedly, and in the end, he wins predominantly as a function of frequency. He was just busy. He was busier than Albin. Albin, early on, you could see he did it in his last UFC fight. He loves that step-through knee and then a counter punch over the top. And he was trying that a little bit, but he couldn't really get it going. And then after that, he kind of lost his way. At first, he was like hardcore exchanging in the pocket. I don't know if he got rocked or what. Arlovski had moments where he was landing good shots, but it wasn't like Albini ever got sat down or anything. He just stopped throwing with the same kind of intensity, or I don't know. He wasn't as committed to the fight anymore. Arlovski, again, another one of these guys, doesn't get enough credit for how mentally tough he is. And again, maybe to an extent to his own detriment, but nevertheless, persevering, fighting through, showing grit, showing determination, and just being busier. Now, he stops a 5-fight losing streak. So, it's amazing. Him and Albini were like 12 and 13 ranked. And in the end, Arlovski wins. But Arlovski was on a 5-fight losing streak. He was still ranked at heavyweight. Now, I know heavyweight is not lightweight, but you can see, just sort of referencing it from the main event, James Vick's concerns, where he can't get a ranked opponent. He has an 8-1 record in the lightweight division, and he's not ranked. You can see he can be a 5-fight losing streak at heavyweight and still be ranked. So something to be said for that. But at a bare minimum, metaphorically speaking, Arlovski stops the bleeding. I know Albini had a nice win in his UFC debut. Not a nice performance in his second go-round in the octagon, and this weird sort of diaper look where he was tucking his shorts in. If it works for him, it works for him, but doesn't lend itself to not being mocked, to be quite candid. Cesar Ferreira, Mutanchi, taking on Nate Marquardt, a split decision win, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. Pretty fair result. Wouldn't have argued if it had gone the other way. I have left Nate Marquardt for dead, metaphorically speaking, again, several times, and he has come back. A guy, Trevor Whitman had a great run with Rose Namajunas, and I know Nate Marquardt lost today, but Trevor Whitman deserves credit as maybe one of the best trainers in MMA because he really finds ways to maximize these guys. And I know after the Kelvin Gastelum loss, we kind of thought Nate Marquardt was done, and I thought he was done, believe me. And maybe he still is. Maybe, he's to an extent on borrowed time here or something, but a solid performance here. He gave it as much as he took it, played to his strengths. Every time he thought he was down, he had another little wrinkle to go to. This was a well-matched fight. Mutanchi able to do things to Marquardt and vice versa. But in the end, neither guy really did enough to stand out. Now, that leaves us in a question of where Nate Marquardt goes. Another guy, by the way, 38 years old, my age. Jesus Christ, he's out there fighting. That's tough. That's 2 losses in a row for him. So he's been on a bit of a rough run. He had 3 losses in a row. Then he beat James Tahuna in 2014. He lost to Brad Tavares. He got stopped by Kelvin Gastelum, and that's when I thought that the show was over. Then he beat CB Dalloway. Then he lost to Thiago Santos. Then he beat Tamdan McCrory. So he's had a couple of nice stoppage wins since then. He lost to Sam Alvey in a terrible fight in Denver, and then he lost to Vitor Belfort. So this should be 3 in a row. So a bit of a 3-in-a-row loss, but not a terrible loss. But you just have to say, when's the last time he lost 3 in a row? Yeah, back in 2013. So 4 years later, he's back there again. Probably some questions he needs to ask himself about how much longer he's going to do this and what that's going to look like. Rafael Sunsao defeating Matthew Lopez. I was talking about this fight when it was going on, and I was saying to myself, and I had some guests here this evening, but I was saying to myself, wow, Sunsao is so good at striking and so good at wrestling and so good at sort of the various different properties and elements of MMA where you can go down the checklist and say, what is he good at? He's good at all of them, but he didn't have this way of necessarily physically imposing himself. And Matthew Lopez looked huge in that cage. Remember, he missed weight. He was 138, pardon me. He was 138 pounds as they went into it. So he had really put on size, or he really just naturally was a bigger guy. And Sunsao early on, he just wasn't physically imposing, but the leg kicks began wearing him down. You can see the weight cut had really gotten to Matthew Lopez. And by the third round, actually the end of the second round, he was mouth breathing heavy. And they go into the third round, and Sunsao has all the energy in the world. He doesn't take a lot of bad shots. I know the Eric Koch loss notwithstanding. He's able to really back guys up, really sort of technically find his mark. Threw a flying knee, but missed. Threw a left, but had Lopez confused, and then comes over with a right, bang, and absolutely cracks him. Didn't see it. The ones you don't see, the ones that land the most, and folded him right there. Calls out TJ Dillashaw after the fact. Now, I don't think he's going to get that, but Jimmy Rivera needs a dance partner. And I know, on paper, Jimmy Rivera versus Rafael Sunsao doesn't sound super awesome, or it doesn't really get your blood flowing. But that is a fight between 2 of the best fighters in that division easily, and 2 of the best fighters kind of in the world. Rafael Sunsao is very good, and so is Jimmy Rivera. And I don't know that I'm necessarily prescribing, face the pain kind of action, but it would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense. Rafael Sunsao is super good and has not had a chance to really ascend in a way that maybe he should have, and it would be beneficial to him, despite his, very excellent resume. And the win he got tonight was so dominant ultimately, and Jimmy Rivera's need for a partner, a dance partner, so to speak, is so clear. I would really like to see that, and I just feel like that would be a great striking contest. It would be a great chess match. They're evenly matched. I could see either guy winning. That one just seems sort of like a no-brainer to me. But Rafael Sunsao, a guy who has just really been committed to his craft, steady winning, steady winning, steady winning, and he needed a really sort of sensational performance because so many of his wins are either dominant but boring, or they just don't stand out for a variety of reasons. And this one stood out, and it stood out in a very big way. And I think he really, really needed that. Clay Guida defeating Joe Lauzon, first TKO win according to Ariel Helwani since 2008. He wins at 107 in the first round. It looked like he had thrown a couple of hooks, and one had caught him right around here. Rocked Lauzon, hit him with an uppercut, dropped him, and just went to work on him. By the time they stood up, Lauzon was bleeding all from the scalp. It was a show. You knew that from working with Team Alpha Male, even though he had been in some tough fights, you had seen the fact that Clay Guida's hands had gotten so much better. They'd gotten so much better. He'd really he was just dedicated to his craft. And that wasn't mean he was like Conor McGregor or anything, but it was obvious improvement. And you saw that tonight. He really just found his moments, stood there in the pocket, had a great post-fight speech. He's a blue-collar hero. And Lauzon had told me on Thursday, I believe, that he wasn't, contemplating retirement, that there was part of him that wanted to get on that UFC 220 Boston card. But, he wasn't necessarily looking for a title, but just sort of playing it by ear and trying to figure it out as it went. And I wonder what this loss will do to his long-term projections for fighting, because this was a bad one. Now, you could say he didn't take a super prolonged beating, but it was he got roughed up in this one. Those elbows on top, oh, my God, vicious. Absolutely vicious from Clay Guida. He really, when he had him hurt, he stepped on the gas. So a bad loss for him, who's been, and Joe Lauzon's been up and down, win one, lose one, win one, lose one. And this one was a tough one, and especially for Clay Guida, it just looks so dominant. Team Alpha Male really deserves some credit. We'll talk about it in just a second. With this fight, as well as the Sage Northcutt fight, pretty clear evidence that they have that it's a great place to go to nurture either developmental talent or to take a guy who maybe is a finished product in some way, and let's say, what can we do to make what you do better and make what you don't do less of a liability? They just have great coaching there. They really do. There's no denying it. And sensational win for Clay Guida tonight. You look at the preliminary card. Don't want to get too much into it. Marlon Moraes defeating John Dodson. Weird scores in this one. 30-27, 27-30, and then 30-27. I'm not sure how I would have scored it, but I find that a little bit unusual. Like, two judges think one guy won all of them, and another one thinks another guy won all the other ones. And especially when Marlon Moraes got dropped, I believe, in that first round from the speed of John Dodson. Bit of an unusual scorecard, but, he was thrown to the wolves here, coming from World Series of Fighting. He needed this win tonight. Huge, huge win for Marlon Moraes, so that's big. Tatiana Suarez getting back to action, absolutely dominating Viviane Pereira. Sage Northcutt. Let's take a moment to really compliment Sage Northcutt. This is, I don't care about that first win he got in the octagon. This is by far his best performance. Absolutely, without question. Look, Sage Northcutt, under the tutelage of his father, this is an important relationship, and you certainly don't want to impede it. But it was not clear, and in fact, questions remain about whether or not that was the kind of tutoring and fight knowledge and partnership, frankly, that he needed to really get better as a fighter. I don't know that it was. It can guide you up to a certain point, and then you need another look. And Team Alpha Male, wow, he looked great tonight. Now, I don't want to go crazy because we didn't see his defensive grappling. We didn't see him put in bad spots. There's a lot of questions still to be asked of Sage Northcutt, but the timing on the double, impeccable. The power on his double, impeccable. Once he was there, not making bad decisions about what to do and how to manage that position. So great. On the feet, just his vision. He was able to see where he needed to throw, was able to lean and counter all the time. They had a great game plan. They had strategized around this guy. They knew what they were getting into with Quiñones. Like, this was, to me, such a needed moment for Sage Northcutt. He needed tonight, and he needed to show what he showed. Not that he showed, I'm going to be the next champion in the weight class. He showed real, true, measurable, important, clear developmental progress, and the kind of developmental progress that gives you hope that in a couple years he might be someone very seriously to reckon with. I don't know if he could have got that where he was. Maybe he could have, maybe he couldn't have. And we'll see how things go with Team Alpha Male. Again, plenty of questions still to ask about his progress, but wow. Great round management, going for takedowns at the end, not getting messed up once you did it down there, picking his shots, being able to look through combinations, not getting scared, pressing Quiñones back, frustrating him, understanding what he was about. This was sensational by Sage Northcutt. Not saying he couldn't beat James Vick or Joe Duffy or Dustin Poirier or Anthony Pettis tomorrow. That's not what this is about. I need you to get from A to B, and then we'll go from B to C and C to D and so forth. And those steps are hard to take, and he did it. He did it tonight excellently. And I was glad, in fact, that it went the distance, because the more cage time he can get, the better. Eventually, you want to see that turn into finishes. You want to see that turn into a guy who's got some savage instincts. But let's get his game moving in the right direction. And shouts to Team Alpha Male, because they did that tonight. Nina Ansaroff beating Angela Hill impressively. We'll talk about that on the Monday Morning Analyst coming up. Not by itself. I'm just saying I'll dig further into detail. Shawn Strickland defeating Court Magee. The commission apparently can't do arithmetic. They announced that as a draw, but it wasn't. Jake Collier defeating Marcel Fortuna, and then Carl Robinson defeating Darren Stewart via rear naked choke in the first round. We'll get to some of the more of those things then. But the big winner tonight, of course, Dustin Poirier defeating Anthony Pettis, a former champion. Bit of a rough spot for Anthony Pettis about where he goes from here. This was a tough loss. This was a painful loss. I don't think it will necessarily deter him, but this really removes him, I should say, from any kind. I mean, not that he was close, but this really pushes him away from contender talk. I wonder if I'm James Vick, I want that Anthony Pettis fight, not so much the Dustin Poirier fight, because that seems out of reach. But Pettis, coming off a loss, he might fall out of that top 15. It's possible. James Vick can get one over him. You can get, a real big name on your resume even still. So maybe that's something to look for. I know I keep making this all about James Vick, but it's from 217. What are you going to do? Okay. If you have any questions, email me, lukethomasnews@gmail.com. I appreciate you guys watching. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to MMA Fighting. And, yeah, what a night in Norfolk. Happy Veterans Day to all the vets out there from November 10, from one Marine to the other. Don't be a Blue Falcon, Semper Fi. Okay, and until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I won't say stay frosty. I'll say what I normally say on my post-fight shows on my YouTube channel. It is 1:51 in the morning. How about this? Get some sleep.